On behalf of the National Congress of American Indians, I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar presentation titled Workforce Development Innovations, Success Stories from Indian Country. My name is Dr. Ian Record. I direct the Partnership for Tribal Governance, also known as PTG. And this is going to be the first in a series of 3 webinars we're going to be holding over the next couple months on this very important topic of tribal workforce development. Today we have with us, as I mentioned, I am the moderator for today's webinar. My name is Ian Record. We are very lucky to have with us today representatives from 4 of the tribal nations that we worked very closely with to develop in-depth case studies of in terms of their workforce development approaches. We have from the Gila River Indian community, we have Lana Chanda, who's the director of Gila River's Employment and Training Department. From the Coeur d'Alene tribe, we have Dr. Chris Meyer, who directs Coeur d'Alene's Department of Education. We'll be joined shortly by Francis Hernandez, who's the director for economic development with Isleta del Sur Pueblo. And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Arlene Templer, who directs the Department of Human Resource Development with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. I just briefly wanted to take you through the agenda for today's webinar. First, we're going to be doing a brief overview. We're going to have each of the 4 tribes represented here today provide a brief overview of their approach to workforce development and how it could perhaps be instructive to other tribal nations who are represented among the attendees on today's call. At 2 o'clock, we're going to be, at 2 o'clock Eastern, we'll be diving into our first of 2 guided conversations, and this is going to focus in on, for each tribe represented here today, one factor that the case studies have highlighted as being a driver of their success. Then we're going to have sort of a wide-ranging discussion at 2:20 about how these 4 tribes are working to sustain and grow the success that they've managed to forge over the last several years. At 2:40, we will open it up for questions and answers, having the panelists answer questions that were submitted through the questions box. And then at the very end, we'll wrap up with a quick overview of some of the other related resources that NCAI has developed on tribal workforce development, as well as a little bit more information about the 2 upcoming webinars that we're going to be having, and then we'll be closing up and talking about next steps. So as I mentioned, we've developed these 4 in-depth case studies. These are available through NCAI's website, and at the end I'll provide you the web link for those, but this gives you a visual of what those case studies look like. And these are very in-depth case studies that really get into the mechanics of how these 4 nations went from their, basically abandoned their status quo approaches to workforce development that were not meeting their needs, and have designed their own approaches that have proven far more effective in meeting their needs. And so with that, I wanted to turn it over to Dr. Chris Meyer to lead us off with a short overview of Coeur d'Alene's approach to workforce development.
It's good morning here in northern Idaho, and good afternoon to those of you who are in the Midwest and East Coast. As Ian had said, my name is Chris Meyer. I'm the Director of Education for the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and I have been in this position since 2006. I am a Coeur d'Alene tribal member, and I've been in education for 40+ years. I also was born on our reservation. I was not born in a hospital. I was born just south of one of our reservation communities, just south of Plummer. As the director, when I stepped into this position, the tribe had asked me, the tribal leadership had come up to me, and each one of them said, would you please take education up another notch? And I did not know what that meant, but I was hoping that I would accomplish what they had hoped for education to do. So in 2007, within my first year of being in this position, I designed the education pipeline that you see on the screen. And that pipeline has guided our workforce development. As the Director of Education, I'm responsible for birth through graduate degrees. And it really, this pipeline has provided us the vision. It has provided me the means to be able to direct education and to develop all the partnerships and to seek all the financial resources to help support every segment of the pipeline. So above the pipeline, you see, this is 2016. We have completed our 2017, and we're in the process of completing our 2018. This is done every single year. So above the pipeline are all the students that we supported in the school year 2015-16. Below the pipeline are all the programs, all the resources that are supporting every segment. So there's approximately 16 segments to this pipeline, and of course our goal is to move our babies through every segment of that pipeline. The tribe has 4 entities. We have Mariman Health, which we have a dental, a medical, vision, and there's a chiropractor program. Tribal government, which I'm under, there's 19 departments under the tribal government. We have a casino resort golf course, and we have development corporation. So my task is to grow our workforce for those 4 entities. And we have about 2,000 employees. In the tribal government, all of the directors, there's 19 of us, and only one is not a Coeur d'Alene tribal member. And each one of us either have a bachelor's or advanced degree, and that is what the tribe wants to achieve. They want us to be able to have the skill set to be able to carry out those jobs so that we can meet our self-governance goals. Let me see. So we also have developed, in relationship with the colleges and universities, degrees that will help meet the tribe's workforce needs as well. So this pipeline has been critical in the development of our workforce. In fact, this spring, we had 16 individuals that had received degrees. 8 of them earned a bachelor's, 1 had received a JD, and 1 had received an EMBA, and the other 6 had earned a 2-year degree. So we're beginning to see the fruits of this pipeline. And this pipeline is supported by many financial resources, grants that have been written, and definitely the tribe's contribution to education. In fact, they support fully the entire post-secondary segment of the pipeline. But this is how we develop our workforce. It's through education.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, for that brief overview, and we're going to dive into much more of the details of your comprehensive approach to workforce development and education, and really fusing those together in our next couple of conversations. I did want to now turn to Arlene Templer to give a brief overview of Salish and Kootenai's approach.
Good morning. It's also morning in Montana. My name is Arlene Templer. I am a tribal member of Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribe, and I have worked for the tribes for 37 years. We took a little different approach. We looked at the tribal membership was coming into the council chamber saying, no, we don't have food, we don't have housing, the TANF in the county is not helping us, a lot of complaints about treatment. Here on our reservation, we are the minority. The tribal membership is only 20% of the population, so there is a lot of racism that still happens here on the reservation. So what the tribe did, and this was 20 years ago, back in 1998, they developed a department. And the department is Development of Human Resource Development. We call it DHRD. And what they did was put all of the wraparound services in one department that would work for workforce development and family stability. So that's where we started. Some of the complaints that the tribal membership were saying was they would get to the county welfare department 5 minutes late. Most of them were hitchhiking, finding any kind of ride that they could get there, and the door would be shut in their face. So what we did, one of the first things is we started to develop a transportation system. At that time, we just bought 2 vans out of TANF money and started making sure that people got to their appointments and could actually do their work requirements. Well, what we ended up doing was contracting and developing our own TANF program so that we could work with our own membership. That worked out fantastic. When we started this process, we were 48% unemployment. So we were one of the tribes that had the 5-year AFDC or welfare limit put on us. So we looked at our membership and thought, what can we do in 5 years to get people employed? So we started the transportation system with the 2 vans. And then I found that Montana Department of Transportation had all of this funding. So we began building a transportation program. At that time, we also developed what we called a mentoring program. Everybody that qualified for TANF, it was a requirement to go through mentoring. Voc rehab clients were required to go through mentoring, and so were the WIA clients, WIA at that time. So the mentoring program is fairly strict. You work on your GED if that's what you need. You get help with your driver's license. You get help with housing, and you are also drug tested. Drug tested is not a means of eligibility, but it is something that you will need to work on, get assessments and follow through as part of your individual family plan. So they are all working on those things in the mentoring. We have reached out to our Salish Kootenai College. They're an awesome partner with us. And through them, they did a lot of adult basic ed kinds of things, pre-college kinds of things. And where that has advanced to at this time is they offer welding certifications. We do all of our CDL trainings through them, and we now are starting apprenticeships with them. We just put through 8 people that got their CNAs, and we were able to put them together or to work in our own department in our elders caregiving program. So when we started out at 48% unemployment in 1998, in 2018, we are at 4% unemployment. So we have taken that entire group of people, did work experience, and have not only just gotten them jobs, but put them in the careers and choices that they would like to be in. And by doing that, when the tribe put all of the wraparound services in one program, we can look at an applicant with one application, and we can help them out with childcare, with LEAP, with work experience, with commodities, so that we're looking at every need that they have and deal with it or help them deal with it. In the mentoring class, we also teach them how to work a crisis. They have to be there at 8 in the morning. They get a half an hour lunch, and they go home at 4:30 at night. This teaches people that have been historically unemployed or generationally unemployed how to work. So they learn when their baby's sick and the daycare center says, no, we're not taking your child today, or their car breaks down, or the refrigerator breaks down. They're taught through this month-long class of how to deal with each and every one of the crises that hits their families so they can make work first. In our tribes, I don't need to tell the tribal people on the phone, it's always been families first. But what we're trying to get them is to see the balance, that you can do family things, but you have to put work in a priority if you want to keep your job. So we've learned all those things, and now with all of the cuts coming, Montana's had some terrible cuts in its health services and nationwide cuts in other programs. People are coming to our program to get work experience staff. The nice thing about that is we're all tribal members in our employment as well. And it's like a hand up to another tribal member. So people take that time to do the training, mentor that person, and help them. And it's really made a big difference for our tribal members to become employable and have the capacities that they need when they're doing their work experience at their individual departments. So it's worked fantastic for us, and I hope I can share any of that stuff further with you. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you so much, Arlene. I really appreciate it. So next up, we have Lana Chanda from the Gila River Indian community, and she has provided a PowerPoint, several slides that give some description to their approach. And Lana, before I turn it over to you, just know that we will just ask to advance slide when you're ready to advance slide, and we'll take care of it for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my name is Lana Chanda. I'm Director of the Employment Training Department at Gila River Indian Community. And I'm not a tribal member, but I have been here for 28 years. So I've been through a lot of changes in WIOA and some of the other funding sources. One of our problems was we had a lot of employers, and we have, like, just for example, we have 3 casinos, equestrian center, 2 golf courses, a Western theme park. We have 3 hospitals, dialysis center. But what was happening was the levels of skills of some of our community members were low, and they weren't able to compete with others that were trying to get employed with our community. So yes, I'm I'm sorry. So we had the opportunity. We were selected from Department of Labor along with Tucson Indian Center to participate in a Career Pathways initiative just to be trained, along with 9 other states. And this would be the first time that a Native entity would be involved at a national level in Washington, D.C. to be trained. So we had to organize a core team of 10, and we attended 2 3-day institutes in Washington, D.C., and there were experts there in education and industry and workforce development. After that, we were able to submit an application to receive a Workforce of Innovation grant, which was $3 million. That ended in 3/30/2016. But the idea was to create a Native American Career Pathways model in Indian country. Next. Career Pathways basically is a clear sequence of education, coursework, and training credentials that include a full range of educational options, work-based learning, work readiness, soft skills, and stackable credentials, leading to industry recognized degrees or credentials of value only in the GRIC labor market. So it was a very unique way of looking at it. Even though I've been in workforce for a long time, this put the employers in the driver's seat. So as you can see on this slide right here, it connects job training, education, and employment. And with us, they had all these roles associated with some of these areas, and our role was to convene and coordinate the whole system. So from workforce, We were just the coordinator. Education, they were partners with industry in the creation of the credentials, but the employers basically led the whole thing. And I'm going to say that is the key for everything. That they were the driver. They selected the education partners that they wanted, and we were kind of like a backup support for the employers because obviously employers are in the market to make money. They don't have time for all of this. So what they did was give us most of the, we did create 5 sectors. So most of them gave us their HR. Once we got the clearance at the top, the HR people came in, and they were actually the ones we worked with day to day. We created, next, we created a, um, a workforce group that met once a month, and we had all 5 sectors represented uh, with a chair for those areas. And the sectors we created were the medical, hospitality, which was culinary, construction, government. We had a fire apprenticeship program in the government sector, and then small business because we had 35 GRIC entrepreneurs. So it was difficult. And all of you know that in Native country we don't have statistics. So we met with employer groups and asked them what their needs were, and then we decided based on that, like what the turnover rate was. Like our medical occupations in 3 years, we were going to be adding 500 jobs. The hospitality turnover rate was 52%. We have 200 tarot contractors. So the need was identified on a one-to-one basis. And the slide that you're seeing here is the career pathways 6 key elements. So we had a plan to go through to create all these sectors. So as you can see, we build cross-agency represent our partnerships. We engaged employers, and the employers got together and they identified their own skill gaps within their particular industries. And we clarified the roles of everybody. We designed the programs. We identified any funding sources and alignment of policies and programs. Next. So basically, this is just a sample of one of the sectors. This is the government sector. Okay? But as you can see, this was our fire apprenticeship training. The length was 18 months, but the outcome had 5 certificates to 22 college credits. The occupation we were going for was a firefighter because that was a need in our community, and the employer was a Gila River entity. The academic level was 9th grade. We had an educational mentor, which I'll explain what that is later, and everything was our work readiness was tailored to that specific industry. And in career pathways, they talk about on and off ramps. So as you can see, okay, they got a CPR certification first, the EMT training. So if this was getting too difficult for them or they didn't want to go the rest of the way, because 18 months is very long, they could take an off ramp and just become an EMT. So some people did that. They did an EMT, then they jumped back on we call it the ramp, and they went on to hazmat certification, basic wildland national certificate. They took the firefighter 1 and 2, and then eventually they were placed in the reserves and then hired through HR. But their college partners, the ones they selected, were Chandler Gilbert Community College and Mesa Community College. And we have these visuals on all of the 5 sectors. But it's been really fantastic to work with the employers, and it's just an approach that was different from we always work with employers, but this was totally different because each employer was sitting at the table once a month. We were sharing all their sector activities, what their design looked like. We got to see all of the resources that this whole community had in place, and a lot of times the resources were not well known to everybody. They didn't know how to access anything. So it was very exciting, invigorating, and the employers were they were relieved to have help because they did want to hire community members, but they just didn't know how to go about raising their skill level. And we were able to get a lot of placements because employer designed program, they were invested in it, and they were more than willing to hire those people that they were putting through their own program.
Well, thank you, Lana. We appreciate that brief overview. And now we're going to be moving on to Isleta del Sur Pueblo. And do we have Francis on the line?
Yes, good morning. It's morning here in El Paso, Texas as well. And I'm happy to be here. I am Francis. My position here is Director of Economic Development. I served my pueblo for the past 5 years in this capacity. A total of 11. I previously worked here and I left, went back and got my education and returned. And so today I serve as Economic Development Director. And I am jumping in the middle of, I guess, what has been transpiring for a few years. But I do work closely with our empowerment department, with all of our leadership. And so I went ahead and let Ms. Ana Silvas know that I would go ahead and take the lead on this today. So what's happened with Isleta del Sur Pueblo is a little bit of history. Is that back in 2001, we did have a casino, a profitable casino, and it was in litigation and was shut down. And so we went from employing almost 800 people within the community, tribal and non-tribal. We experienced a mass layoff, and from that point on, we have been looking for ways to change our ability to create employment, higher education levels. And our message really is, how do we change what happened in that point in time, and how do we prevent it, and how do we move forward? And so most of the efforts were single-handedly being done by Ana Silva's department, which was empowerment. And together she tried to combat the workforce, the education, the data collection. She had many hats. And so recently what happened is that there was a different opportunity created, and workforce development and our youth programs were placed under my department. So it's a division under economic development. And so together, we still work very close together. We have some action plans for socioeconomic development. And using both departments' efforts, we continue to drive that message, that wraparound service message. And with a larger net casting, we capture both departments' efforts. And so our action plan today is to create some kind of I guess, a blueprint for practical implementation of the planning, training, convergence model type, which brings in education and tribal service strategy. And so what we've done recently is we reorganized those divisions. We still continue to work with Native Pathways, which is our training program. We continue to work with the youth. We have action plans that are aligned with our nation building efforts. I guess the biggest important or the most important thing for us is that we have a recent socioeconomic profile, which has allowed us to create that action plan to combat some of the statistics that have presented. And so what we do is we continue with our WIOA program. We continue helping support services such as job opportunity, skill building. We have opened an office in San Antonio, Texas, where we have done a strategic plan that indicated there was a lot of Tiguas and Native Americans in those areas, which is part of our service area for WIOA. And so we opened an office there in order to continue serving the Native American population in that area and continue the work. Along with that office, I mean, there's a lot of internal and external partnerships, but that's just one. And I didn't have a chance to put a PowerPoint together. I kind of got notice like 24 hours ago that I was going to go ahead and work on this, but I thought I'd speak on what we do and what we continue to do in order to continue the efforts that started back in 2012 with our Tigua Nation Building Program. So our Tigua Nation Building Program continues. We teach the history, we teach timeline, we teach all about our culture, and it's more important than ever because our youth and some of our tribal descendants, as of 2014, we started to enroll beyond the 1/8 blood quantum. So our tribe grew overnight. It doubled in size. And so we've got a lot of disconnected tribal members. And so our nation building continues to educate that group. And our 2016 socioeconomic profile showed us or let us target some of the areas that really stood out for us. And one of them was the percentage of people that participated in our feast and ceremonies, how many people really did own their home, the percent of high school diploma attainment, and some of our labor force information. And so we continue to work together through the education piece and through workforce development to target these statistics that have surfaced. So I think our biggest factor here is that we do collect data, that we do have a profile, economic profile that is done every 4 years so that we know where our action plans need to be, and then continue the work, like I said, through our WIOA, our empowerment department, and the other divisions that help our tribal members financially or business and entrepreneurship wise.
Well, thank you, Anna, for that brief overview. And some of what you touched on is a good segue into our next section here. We're now going to dive into our first of two guided conversations, and this first one deals with factors driving success. And what you see before you on this slide are the particular factors that we isolated in our case studies that we developed in partnership with the tribes that NCAI developed. And we feel like it's a good mix that really illustrates the kind of innovation that these tribes and so many others that we've documented through the course of our project are demonstrating to great effect through their own self-designed workforce development approaches. And so I wanted to start with Arlene and Salish and Kootenai, and in the case study, it discusses as an important factor driving your success how your programming has really prioritized cultural immersion and literacy, as well as personal wellness strategies across the programming that you engage in for workforce development. So, Arlene, can you speak for a few minutes about that approach?
Yes. You said cultural awareness, and what was the other one?
So, the cultural immersion, the culture and healing that you've systematically integrated across your programming.
Okay. One of the things that we recognized early beyond is that a lot of the people had generational unemployment. And not only that, but we had a lot of people that were released from the prison. We had a lot of prison population. And in Montana, we are 7% of the state, Indian versus non. But in the prison system, we are 28%. So that was a huge workforce to begin working with. So what we did is develop in DHRD a work experience program. And the funding we did that with was WIOA, VOC Rehab, NEW, which is Native Employment Works, and TANF. In all of those programs, we have a cultural component that works with our tribal members in healing and wellness. Our tribe also has set 3 goals for us as departments, and those are health and wellness, economic development, and culture. So in everything we do, we bring those three things in. Some of the things that our tribe seen or that our department seen as important was to develop our own employment. So one of the things that I was able to talk to the tribal council about was purchasing a gas station that was that a tribal member had lost. We purchased the gas station and turned it into a gas station, laundromat, car wash, store. We ran it with tribal members that were doing the work experience program. No other people, salaried people, worked in the place except for the people on work experience. That worked out wonderfully. We had native people, and everybody, when you have a native store, natives usually come to the store, especially when we have a population that is, we're the minority in. Everybody, all the tribal members come to the store, which has really helped us out. And what works there is we can put the people to work that have no work experience generationally, people out of prison and felonies, and sex offenders that can't find any employment. What happens in that kind of a setting is that everybody is coming in and they learn, the workers learn shift work, money management, customer service, and most of all begin to develop relationships with the people that come in. I lose my people constantly under work experience because people come in, develop that relationship with them, see how they work, see how loyal they are to the job, and constantly recruit them from my program, which is good. We are always in a new training mode, but it gives the membership a chance to get back in the workforce. Even the sex offenders, they're not under or have control over children or around children. So it's something we've been able to do there. And in one incident, we had a sex offender that only had a couple of years left of his charge where he was on probation. So we had him work in the store for those 2 years until he could go back into the employment world. At the same time, in that store, we started a transportation hub. We now have a $1 million transportation program that has also mechanical bays. So we've been able to put tribal membership to work in all of those as well. And we now have 22 drivers. We train those drivers through Salish and Kootenai culture, or Salish and Kootenai College. Plus, we bring in training dollars to do the CDL training. We also started a caregivers program, and I have a $1.6 million caregivers program, which we're doing the apprenticeships for and taking those home care providers and training them to be CNAs, which is a highly demand. When they are a offender or a felon, they can go into tribal council and ask if they can work for a particular elder. If the elder, and everybody knows everybody on a reservation, knows and trusts this person to work with them, they just sign a waiver saying, yes, this person can be in their home and do the caregivers program. So it makes it very nice that tribal members, that's your cultural component, are working actually with our tribal elders through home care providing, and then increasing their education to CNAs as they want. So we also in our tribe give time for education. We give 8 hours a week paid leave for educational leave. So I am the kind of supervisor that is always encouraging people to increase their education. The college is right across the street, and we encourage them to go all the time. Most of our program, DHRD, is people that have come through the ranks. We call them homegrown. They have come from our WIA program or our TANF program or our voc rehab program. Through their work experience, we have then hired them. So we've had a great mentoring process through our work experience program. So that's how we have become the low unemployment that we do have. Thank you.
Arlene, thank you so much for that. And you've touched on a lot of threads that we document in the case study in further detail. And it's interesting to hear about the home care providers. I think that's an interesting new wrinkle that we may want to add to the case study at some point. I wanted to turn now to Gila River and specifically focus on what is referred to in the case study as closing the loop through policy. And Lana, specifically, I'm talking about the action that the council took back in November 2011 to institute a new human resources policy that gives, at that time, gave automatic hiring priority to WIA or WIOA participants, and then it was expanded to include career pathways participants. And these, it covers folks who complete their training programs and then excel in their work experience placements. Can you talk for a few minutes about what prompted that move and how it's benefiting the community?
Yes. Yes, our HR department saw the need at that time, and I had been advocating it for a while to, you know, I guess the justification was, you know, we put all these people through WIA and we pay for their training money, and then if they don't get hired, it's a waste of their training money. So they saw value in that, and so they went ahead and designed or passed the policy. It's in our HR manual that say we do a workplace placement in a department and they want to hire them, typically, you know, it still it has to be advertised and there has to be a selection committee. Well, now the director of that department can simply do a memo to want to hire that person, and they don't have to go through anything, and they are hired, and that's really benefited career pathways. It's benefited, you know, just our regular WIA participants. And I just want to give you an update. They are also now this year going to update that even further. Like in our department, we have TANF recipients, we have AmeriCorps recipients, we have TARO in our department, so we also have TARO participants, and they're going to include all of the participants or trainees that come through our department. So that they're expanding that even more because it's an excellent way to keep community members receiving those jobs. So that's a good update. Did you want me to talk about any other factors?
Yeah, that's great news. Thank you for sharing that, Lana. Again, you can find a lot more detail about this in the case study in that section of factors driving success. I wanted to turn now to Coeur d'Alene and have Chris talk for a few minutes about this factor driving success that we've titled Nurturing a Commitment to Civic Obligation and Service. And we quote Dr. Meyer in the case study as saying that prior to taking this step of nurturing this commitment, that our college graduates, quote, were not being exposed to an indigenous-based curriculum that raised their spiritual, political, and critical consciousness. They were not being prepared to serve as tribal advocates in their home communities. So, Dr. Meyer, can you talk a little bit about, you know, the recognition of that dynamic at play in your communities and what steps you've taken to change that dynamic?
Yes, I would be happy to, Ian. As Ian had said, I had shared with my supervisor, Robert Matt, my concern. We have been doing an excellent job in terms of producing graduates out of that pipeline. There are some ruptures, by the way, but we have been producing lots of graduates. However, they did not have they were not able to enter into that position that they were hired for and to be able to carry it out. And there's reasons behind that. However, what was missing also was that strong sense of identity with the tribe strong. They had the scholarship skills, but didn't feel the heart, the having strong stewardship and guardianship and spirituality connections towards the tribe, or the capacity that they were in. So, because the tribe wants to be able to self-govern our economy, our education, and to be able to protect our culture, our language, our history, we felt that we needed to go back to those ways of being. And that pipeline now is being held up by 5 major pillars, and we are developing those in all of our program, and they are membership, scholarship, stewardship, guardianship, and a 5th one was added recently, spirituality. So again, we want to produce graduates, to have people in our workforce that have the ability and the desire to be able to protect our people, our language, our children, our forests, our waters, and our large and small animals. So we are really excited about these pillars and the changes that we are beginning to see in result of them being embedded in all of our programming. And that's on our college campuses and off also. So we're really pleased that we're developing a workforce that has a heart for our people.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, for sharing that. So I wanted to switch gears now for the last part of this first conversation, and that's with Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and specifically the factor driving success that we identified in the case study titled the culture of advancement is what we called it. And as the case study points out, the ultimate end goal of this drive to create this culture of advancement at Isleta is a well-trained, highly qualified, adaptable. That's something I've heard time and again from the Pueblo leadership. We want to build a workforce that's adaptable, and also culturally conversant workforce that understands and embodies the value of hard work and its personal, familial, and community rewards. And so, Francis, if you could just talk for a few minutes about that particular aspect of Isleta's approach.
Sure. Some of the, I guess, the challenges that we've had is, again, I think I heard somebody else say that, is that we don't have anybody who is prepared to take over some of the existing jobs from people that have been there for years, and that they're not ready to take over those specific jobs. And so one of the end goals was to have an apprentice program in place, perhaps. And that's something that we have already started, and we'll continue. And so the apprentice positions that were identified were, like, for example, in finance, in our Tigua Incorporated 8A company. We have an IT section there that we needed to develop people into those positions. We also have an apprentice now in our tribal operations area, learning that field, and then the business development specialist position is also in the works for an apprentice, and this way we could have highly qualified individuals that could just step in when leaders that have been with the Pueblo for decades retire, that there'll be somebody to take their place. And as far as the culture piece, it's always encouraged to work for the Pueblo. But we recently had a clinic that is going to be built. That's going to provide, I think, over 70 jobs. And so a lot of the medical field opportunity is being advertised at our juntas. We're trying to create some kind of tiered funding for these positions. For example, if you continue your education in any of certain fields that will then place you in the HHS new clinic, your funding would be tiered like 120% for these positions versus, other vocational and training jobs that may so that it can entice our community in the into these fields because we do not have the trained tribal members ready to go when that clinic opens, and we're looking at about 2 years, and so we're starting to plan that training piece for that clinic. And I spoke a little bit about our culture and making sure that our tribal members, get that nation building and have the ability to know their culture, their timeline, the historical timeline, and where they come from, so that they can feel that pride of working for their community, and once they have their education, they return back and work for the pueblo.
Thank you, Francis, for that. So that gives you a window into a few of the factors driving success across these four tribal workforce development approaches. I should mention that for each of the four case studies at hand, there's between 3 and 5 factors driving success and detailed explanations of each in each of the case studies. So now we're going to move on to our guided conversation number 2, which is about sustaining success. But I should remind folks that after this conversation, we're going to be diving into Q&A with the panelists, and we've already gotten a couple of questions in. So feel free to, if you have questions at this point, enter them into the questions box there in your dashboard there. So I wanted to move into this really critical question around sustainability. So, as we've seen across a number of the tribes that we've worked with on this project, that it's one thing to find success through the design and implementation of your own tribally distinct workforce development approaches, but then the challenge becomes how do you sustain and grow that success over time? And so that's the question I wanted to throw out to the four panelists today. How is your nation working to grow and sustain its workforce development success? And then how are you overcoming new challenges and seizing new opportunities? It sounds like, based upon what's been already shared, this constant refinement that's going on in these approaches to continue to figure out new ways to become more effective and also be capable, maintain your capability of supporting and serving a growing population. So I'll just open it up to the floor if anyone wants to dive right in.
For the Coeur d'Alene tribe, to be able to continue to grow and sustain our work, partnerships and the relationships with those partnerships are essential, and also the need to continue to seek funding. Education continues to become more and more expensive. All the colleges and universities are passing on, due to the decrease of state funding to those institutions, those costs have been transferred to each of the individual students. So the individual students collectively are bearing the cost of the operation of those colleges and universities. And so working at the state level to discuss that and share concerns, but are continuing to seek funding to be able to continue to bear the cost of being able to support our students. I will need to continue to do that. And the dealing with some of the ruptures that are occurring on our pipeline, especially at that high school level, and then also the increase of drugs and we have a number of babies that have been born addicted, and knowing that they're going to be coming through our education pipeline, and how are we going to be able to serve them in collaboration with our schools, and becoming more knowledgeable in terms of how we do that together. So and we are growing also in terms of creating cultural curriculum also. So that's going to be able to take years to be able to design Coeur d'Alene history, social studies units so that they can be implemented in our schools. So there continues to be a lot of work and seeking the funding to help support all of those various pieces.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, for sharing that. Very insightful. And I really want to highlight that theme of partnerships. That was something we saw across all of it, not just the today, but all the other 24 or so tribes we worked with and during the course of this project. Is partnerships absolutely critical to make sure that you have at your disposal the services, the training, the education that you need to develop the kind of workforce you want on your own terms. It's also critical for defraying the costs associated with that process. And that's one of the things we really highlight in depth in our workforce development toolkit, which I will be providing folks a very brief overview towards the end of the webinar. I wanted to turn the floor over though to others, the other panelists, in terms of this question around sustainability, and see if we can get a little bit more insight into what you guys are doing at the other three tribes on this front.
I'd like to talk about
next.
Gila River. Oh.
Go ahead, Gila River.
Okay. I'll be quick. Basically, some of the sustainability we are seeing, because we've already developed the employer relationship model and meeting, and the way we're doing it, it's becoming a way that we do business with all of our employers in our departments. And it's really great because we're sitting down with employers talking about credentials and how do we, embed credentials throughout the training. The council's given us 3 positions to continue our work in career pathways. We have the educational mentor model. I didn't talk about that, but our trainers actually took the courses with the students to see why they weren't successful, or, so that we're continuing that. The hiring policy is expanded, so that's going to, go very, well towards sustainability. We're continuing our current sectors, and we're developing a new one, conservation, because we have farming and hydrologists that we need to be training. What came out of the construction sector were apprenticeships. So Tara was involved in our construction sector. So now, as a result of that, I think we had two apprenticeships during career pathways. Now we have 12 in electrical, masonry, and heavy equipment. One of the challenges is the community colleges maintain that 12 to 15 person, student that they have to have. And so we've kind of, we're not able to, that challenge is too much, so we're not able to get anything from the colleges to like lower numbers. So we've kind of moved in some of the sectors from cohort learning to apprenticeships. And now we're looking at apprenticeships not only in construction areas, but say like office manager, or there's apprenticeship models for everything you can think of. So we're looking at that because it's very specific and incredible training, and it has credentials along the way. The other thing is, when we first started with career pathways, we had like 68% of our people couldn't meet the academic levels of the sector, because each sector also created what the academic level would have to be to get through the training or through the college classes. And so now we're working with education, and we're going to be hosting a lab together that will address, say, GED or upgrade in skills, academic skills, that also high school students could come in and learn, and also college students that might be having some problems with academics, math, whatever. So that's what's come out of it. So we're real happy with that. And that's all.
Thank you, Lana. So Francis or Arlene?
I'll go. Salish Kootenai is doing a lot of economic development. And what we're trying to do with that economic development is do those apprenticeships like the last person spoke of. And we have Salish Kootenai College that we can put people through for to get the credentials or begin the training that they need. We also have our mentoring classes that can gear to specific kinds of jobs. So the economic development will be huge on our reservation. The problem we're running into is infrastructure. We have outgrown a lot of our areas, and infrastructure money or infrastructure grants are really hard to locate. Our DHRD building used to be a one-stop shop, but because we have grown so much, we have programs in a whole bunch of different places. And because of space issues, I now have people in about 7 different buildings. So we've lost our concept of the one-stop shop. And it would be nice to, I keep hearing about infrastructure dollars out there, but I haven't seen them come out yet that tribes can access. So we're on the verge of economic development, but I am still worried about infrastructure.
Thank you, Arlene. Francis?
For us, like I mentioned earlier, it's the apprentice program, our continuing education awards. There's a mentoring program that also empowerment and economic development have as well. So Native Americans with with degrees mentoring the students. We have a tremendous support from our tribal council, which is always a factor contributing to continued success. We also have Pueblo-wide action plans that I mentioned. Those action plans are to update and to keep creating our business codes, our policies, so we can keep attracting outside businesses. We also have an action plan to build capacity, which is again what we've been focused on this conversation here with our tribal members, and provide that financial opportunity for entrepreneurs as well. And we also focus on increasing the YDSP economic partnerships internally and externally, and then preparing the youth, to be within the competitive workforce. We need to increase the participation in the programs in order to prepare them. So that's also part of the action plans that will sustain and continue the success for us.
Thank you, Francis. Appreciate it. This is some good insight into how you're working to sustain and grow your efforts. And I know in having worked with all of your tribes very closely that it's ongoing work, it's a process, and it's not an event. And I think that's an important takeaway for folks on the call, that this requires constant vigilance, constant strategy development and implementation, and the work never ends, it only grows. So with that, I did want to open it up for questions and answers. And so if you have a question and haven't inputted it into the question box, please do so now. We have 4 questions so far. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to them all, but we'll make sure to get to them all afterwards if we're not able to do so during the live webinar. The first question is from Don Motanik, who's one of our attendees, and he addresses it to Dr. Meyer, but I would want to open it up to all the panelists, because I know most, if not all, the tribes represented here on the webinar are engaging in this. But it asks, do you have tribal member demographics to know where your workforce is located off the reservation, such as members living in nearby major urban areas like Spokane, for instance?
Oh, good question. We actually do. My supervisor, Robert Matt, just was sharing that last week. We had an Indian Education Summit, and he was showing a map of where tribal members are throughout the entire United States. And there's a heavy number in Washington State, on the coast of Washington State, California, etc. So good question. Yes.
And Francis, I know that you referred to the Isleta del Sur's descendant budget impact study that was done when the Pueblo was going through the process of revamping their criteria for citizenship and moving away from blood quantum. Can you speak a little bit more about that data effort and how it's been informative to your workforce development approach?
Sure. So we did a questionnaire, I guess, or a survey from our operations and census departments, and which included the newly enrolled descendants. And our survey actually attracted close to 4,000 tribal members. We felt that it was a very highly attractive questionnaire, and it was quite the buzz throughout our community. And so we ended up attracting almost 4,000 individuals who responded to our survey. And based on that, we did come up with the percentage of people that lived within 125 miles of our pueblo. And we also were able to get a snapshot of how many people lived outside of Texas, California, and the concentration of our tribal members we identified were within, Arizona, California, Texas. And so we were able to determine that with our socioeconomic questionnaire. Is that more or less what you wanted as far as the answer?
I remember
Yeah.
in reviewing
Okay.
that study that you found that the folks that were descendants that would become citizens often had higher degrees of or higher levels of educational attainment, degrees, certifications, et cetera, that could be assets to the Pueblo.
That's correct. I believe all the percent for the new enrollees, I believe it was, let's see if I have that handy here. The tribal members that lived on the reservation. Let's see. I believe it was like four. I don't want to misquote, but there was a big difference. It was at least 5% difference of tribal members that lived off the reservation that did attain a higher education, further than a high school diploma, versus the tribal members that lived on the reservation. So it was at least, I want to say it was 6%, but it was at least 5% of that.
Well, great. Maybe following the call, we could share some more information about that, and not just the results, but I think the approach that Isleta took to developing that survey and implementing it and then analyzing the results is very instructive for other tribes. Other folks on this question before we move on to the next one? Okay, so the next question is from Miranda, and she says, what do you do as far as outreach to inform your communities and tribal members of the services available to them, and once you get them in, how do you keep them coming back? This is a challenge that we've heard other tribes bring up, is that we have these services, but there's not a broad awareness among everyone in the community of what services are available, how they're designed to help individuals, and how they might all work together.
This is Frances with Isleta del Sur. What we've done is we have a mandatory, update of your tribal ID card. And so, though our census card is updated every 5 years, our preferred referred care ID expires every year. And we take advantage of that opportunity to bring everybody in that lives within the area, and we update that data when they come in, and they update that. And also, if they don't have those IDs updated, that they don't receive, it's kind of attached to our distribution at the end of the year. If they don't have that update, then they don't receive the stipend at the end of the year. So that's been one way that we've been able to capture the people that don't live in our pueblo or within the 125 miles radius. They do have the opportunity to do it via electronically or over the phone or paper. So we do all three in order to capture them. We also have a email, a large group of email, I guess, emails that are sent out to everyone notifying them and that whatever either traditional or non-traditional events are coming up. We have school fairs where we also try to capture back to school fairs to try to capture that information. So every opportunity that we can, we try to get. We have census available. They know who's filled out most recent information form and who has not. And so we try to capture them that way.
Thank you, Francis. Other folks on this question of community outreach?
The Coeur d'Alene Tribe has a website, and then the my Department of Education has a website also, and it has all of our programs on it. So there's links to every one of the programs that we offer, and we're sending out email messages, etc.
So, Dr. Meyer, I think you're being a little modest because I remember in developing the case study that you also engage what's referred to as bulldog advising, that you really are out there engaging,
That's true.
Engaging particular tribal members on a one-on-one basis to really do that sort of interpersonal education around, you know, here's the services we have available for you based upon where you are in your personal journey, your professional journey, your educational journey, and really encouraging them to take advantage.
We do that, and we have over 82 students that are earning certificates for 2 years, and then we have about 50 students that are earning bachelor's, and so we're not short of any work, that's for sure.
This is Arlene.
Go ahead, Arlene.
What we do is attend all of the job fairs. DHRD has a table at the job fairs, but we also are tied to all of the poverty programs. So when people come in to get assistance, any kind of assistance, then they are required to enter the work program. So once they see the benefit of coming in for services, then they get tied to training, then they get tied to work experience, and then they get tied to employment. So it's just kind of a step ladder once they enter any of the poverty programs.
This is Gila River. We attend district meetings. We have a website where services are listed. The community has a Facebook page. We send out flyers. We advertise in the paper. We have our own job fair, and then we attend all of the other departments' job fairs as well.
It's interesting, Lana, you bring up the issue of Facebook and social media. We've seen somewhat of a coming around on this issue in terms of using social media as a way to educate tribal members about tribal programs. I know many tribes in the past and some in the present have had an aversion to using social media because that's where some of the trolling of the tribal council takes place and that sort of thing, and it can tend to be sometimes a not very constructive space for the tribe to be in. But I think more and more they're seeing the benefits of the fact that this is how more and more people, this is their primary way of receiving information, and we need to take advantage of this tool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a question now from Rachel. Rachel's wondering about, do any of your tribes receive any assistance, either technical or financial, from your state's economic development or workforce development offices? She says that in her state, this is conspicuously absent, so she was just curious.
Coeur d'Alene Tribe doesn't.
This is Arlene. I actually sat on the state, the governor appointed workforce investment board.
Gila River.
I was going to say, Arlene, did that have any impact positively or negatively in the ability of the tribes to get access to technical or financial resources from the state?
Yeah, it actually helped a lot because they weren't even acknowledging or realizing the employment opportunity with tribal members. They were saying, we don't have employees, we don't have employees. And I said, hey, 10 miles away or 100 miles away, I have 400 people. So it helps me link people into jobs. Plus, it helps me just do the networking and connecting and, seeing where those financial pockets are.
In the state of Arizona, this is Gila River, in the state of Arizona, way back when, we were able to get WIOA funding from the state. So as a result of that, we get all kind of technical assistance training, and we do the Department of Labor WIOA, and we also have state WIOA. So that puts us right in line for all of the. So we know all of our workforce areas, and we're like actually attending trainings with them.
That's great, and I remember that's something that we do talk about briefly in the case study. And you have it's a 19 tribal area.
Yes, 19
tribal organization as well that works at a state level.
Yes.
So we have another question. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say we are considered a state one-stop development area, and our department is a one-stop center where we have state-mandated partners that have to provide services within our department. So it would be like we have dislocated worker, we have DES coming in to register our clients, voc rehab, and I think veterans. So because of that relationship, we do have those services within our state-determined one-stop.
That's great. So the next question is from Gloria. And she said, are the workforce development program directors on the call today open to working with external corporations? If so, how can we engage to work with hiring constituents from your programs?
This is Arlene. That's going to be a hard sell. We have tried to get tribal members to move off the reservation. We have opportunities ourselves with SNK Electronics. And people do not want to leave the reservation. I don't know if any of those people have had success, but we have not. I think a lot of it stems from the old move the Indians off the reservation and get them to assimilate. They shipped them out to Chicago. They shipped them out to California. I don't know if that's had an impact on the youth and other generations. But people will not move off the reservation for jobs.
Others have responses to this question about engaging and partnering with external corporations for the purposes of hiring tribal members?
That's an interesting.
The Gila River.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
That's an interesting question. I've not done that before. I wouldn't mind finding out more about that because we have 1,200 tribal members that live off the reservation. So I think it would be something worth looking at.
Go ahead, Lana, before I chime in, I had a point I wanted to draw out on that.
I'm just saying pretty much the same thing. People don't want to leave, but what I am seeing now is with our young people, our youth, they don't seem to be as scared of that, or they are more willing to do that.
This is Francis with Isleta del Sur, and we have a Tigo Incorporated 8A company, and they are pretty much set up all over the U.S. and Puerto Rico, and we have 401 total employees as of 2017, and 54 of those 400 employees are El Paso employees, and we have one that was situated in Colorado Springs. But otherwise, we're in the same situation. They do not want to move from the reservation.
We actually see the opposite. We see a lot of tribal members that are moving off the reservation. So that's why we'd be interested in looking at that.
Yeah, I think, so it sounds like there's different mindsets and different approaches, and there's shifting attitudes among tribal members. And I think, one of the things tying back to some of what you guys shared earlier around data is really having a firm handle on where exactly your tribal members are located, what each of their education attainment levels are, skill sets, et cetera, and making sure that, for those that, for instance, are either living off of the reservation or willing to move off the reservation for job and economic opportunity, that the tribe's in a position to connect them to opportunities. And conversely, when the tribe is able to grow the job opportunities that available on reservation, either through its own government or enterprises or other job opportunities it's able to identify or help to create, to know what those people can bring to the table so that they can connect them with those opportunities once they're available.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that there was one other question. I believe it was just a request to speak offline for more advice about. This is from an attendee that says, we have ended our WIOA grant and are trying to bring that function in-house. Is someone available to talk offline to have a discussion about how best to do that? And so I don't know if anyone among the four wanted to volunteer or might have some particular advice for this person.
I don't.
Sorry.
Well, we'll follow up with this attendee and see if we can't connect that person to someone who could give them some advice on how to go about that process. We have about 6 or 7 minutes left. And I did want to wrap up. And I first wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to our 4 panelists for joining us here today, not just for taking time out of their busy schedules today to share their knowledge and wisdom experience about their work in this area and their tribe's work in this area, but also their partnership with NCAI over the course of the development of these case studies, and also providing us input and feedback on the development of our tribal workforce development toolkit. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that this entire project, the case studies that we've shared today, the toolkit, which I'll talk about here in a moment, and also some of the other resources that I'll share with you, would not have been possible without the generous support of the Northwest Area Foundation, which has provided critical funding for this work. Not just developing the resources, but actually getting them out there to Indian country and in the hands of the right people, tribal leaders, tribal workforce development practitioners, and key people in the community, so they can think in new and more strategic ways about how to approach this challenge of developing workforce. I wanted to take a minute and talk about the Workforce Development Toolkit for tribal leaders and workforce development practitioners. We actually launched this toolkit at our recent mid-year conference in Kansas City just about 3 weeks ago. And this really distills and synthesizes all of the learning that we engaged in during the course of this 3+ year project. It draws in the 4 tribes and their stories represented here today, and as well as I believe 22 other tribes that we partnered with in the toolkit. And what the toolkit does is it basically boils down the challenge of workforce development to 15 key strategic considerations that tribal decision makers need to engage at a very thoughtful level if they are to craft a truly self-governed approach, meaning something that the tribe itself truly owns, that is really about their priorities, their circumstances, their needs, versus what some federal agency thinks is best or what is easiest for that agency. So it's got 15 key strategic considerations. Each of those considerations features two leading tribal examples. So tribes that are being very innovative when it comes to that particular aspect of workforce development. Things like, for instance, partnerships, things like data, things like funding, things like integrating your programs, coordinating them all together so they're working in unison. It also, each consideration features some key questions to consider that really get tribal decision makers to look at their own approach, how it's currently working and how it could work better. And then a set of policy recommendations that give tribal decision makers sort of a beginning list of things to think about doing if they want to really develop a self-governed, effective approach to tribal workforce development. And so again, we released that just a few weeks ago. It's available on our website, and we encourage folks to use it, to engage with us, to get the guidance that they might need to learn how to implement it, and then to share with us how they are implementing it and how it's benefiting their communities. I did also want to mention that back in late 2016, NCAI released a federal policy brief on tribal workforce development that really looks at what is the federal government's job in tribal workforce development. And really the strong point that it makes is that the federal government's job is not to dictate what tribes do when it comes to developing their human capacity. It's to support tribes as they develop their own approaches to developing their human capacity. Obviously, with the passage of the major legislation late last year, the new 477 law, as it's called, we're going to be needing to update this brief, and we plan to do so and re-release version 2.0 at our annual convention in Denver in October. We also have on our NCAI's YouTube channel, we have a workforce development playlist that is growing, and after this webinar video is added and a couple of others that we have in the works, will be close to 30 videos specifically on tribal workforce development and a lot of the issues that we've broached today. So we encourage you to go to NCAI's YouTube channel and check out those. And then last but not least, wanted to remind you that we don't have exact dates set up yet, but late next month, we're going to be doing a webinar that gives folks the basic 411 about the new workforce development law that was passed last December. It takes effect this December, and so folks can hear from the leading minds and authorities on this law, what it means, how tribes should think about implementing it, what some of the leading tribes are already doing to expand their 477 approaches based on this legislation, and then also some red flags and some cautions to be attentive to as tribes engage the federal agencies that are a part of this law about how best to implement and how the federal agencies are supposed to be supportive of tribes' expanded or new plans based upon this legislation. And then in early August, we'll be doing basically a how-to webinar on the new toolkit that I mentioned. So wanted to leave you with some contact information and a link to where you can learn more. The link featured there is to the overall workforce development project that the Partnership for Tribal Governance has built. And that contains links to the 4 case studies, to the toolkit, to the federal policy brief I just mentioned, as well as a plethora of other related resources. And then if you have any questions about any of the resources that we've shared with you today, just about tribal workforce development in general, wanting to get a bead on what other tribes are doing, please just send us an email to that email address listed there on the screen, and we'll be happy to either answer your question or connect you to the people who can.